The train pulled out of the station just as the evening sky turned orange. I leaned my head against the window, hoping the long journey home would help me forget the worst week of my life. I had lost my job, my rent was overdue, and I hadn't spoken to my younger sister in almost 3 years because of a painful misunderstanding. Silence felt safer than facing my own thoughts. The carriage was nearly empty except for an elderly woman reading a novel, a young father playing with his daughter, and a man who sat directly across from me. He looked to be in his early 50s, wearing a plain gray coat and carrying an old leather bag. There was nothing unusual about him, yet the moment our eyes met, he smiled as though he already knew me. "You've always tapped your fingers when you're worried," he said casually. I stopped moving immediately. "I'm sorry?" I asked. He chuckled softly. "You don't even realize you're doing it." I stared at him, confused. Maybe he had guessed. A few minutes later he spoke again. "You still blame yourself for your mother's last birthday, don't you?" Every breath caught in my chest. No one knew about that. 3 years earlier, my mother had invited the family to dinner. I skipped it because I chose to work overtime instead. She passed away from a sudden heart attack only 2 weeks later. Ever since then, I carried the guilt of missing our final celebration together. "Who are you?" I whispered. Instead of answering, he looked out the window. "The past is heavy," he said quietly. "But guilt doesn't honor the people we lose. Love does." My heart pounded. I searched my memory, trying to recognize his face, but I had never seen him before. The train continued through fields and small towns. Rain began tapping gently against the windows. Several stops later, a ticket inspector entered the carriage. A teenage boy sitting nearby nervously searched his empty pockets. I lost my wallet," he admitted. The inspector sighed. "You'll have to leave at the next station." Before anyone else reacted, the stranger reached into his pocket. "I'll pay for the boy's ticket." The inspector accepted the money. The teenager's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, sir." The stranger simply smiled. "One day," he said, "help someone else." There was no lecture. No demand for repayment. Just kindness. After the inspector left, I couldn't stop watching him. How could someone know my deepest regrets and still choose to spend his attention helping complete strangers? Then he surprised me again. "You still keep your father's watch." I instinctively touched my backpack. Inside was the old silver watch my father had given me before he passed away. I had never shown it to anyone. "Enough," I said. "Please tell me who you are." He looked at me with calm eyes. "Does knowing my name matter more than hearing what you need to hear?" I didn't answer. He continued. "You think you've failed because you lost your job. But losing work isn't losing your worth." His words hit harder than I expected. For weeks I had measured myself by my failures. The train suddenly slowed. Outside, passengers on another platform rushed through the rain. Inside the carriage, the young father realized his daughter had left her favorite stuffed rabbit on the bench at the previous station. The little girl burst into tears. Without hesitation, the stranger opened his leather bag. Inside was a small knitted teddy bear. "It belonged to my granddaughter," he said gently. "She'd want someone else to smile today." He handed it to the little girl. Her crying stopped instantly. She hugged the teddy tightly. The father offered money, but the stranger refused. Kindness grows when it's given away. Watching that simple moment made something inside me soften. Maybe kindness really could travel from one heart to another. The stranger turned back toward me. "Your sister misses you." I looked down. "I don't think she does. She calls your old phone every year on your birthday." I froze. I had changed my number after moving. There was no way he could know that. Tears blurred my vision. I was angry, I admitted. So was she. He nodded. Pride builds walls. Kindness builds doors. For the first time in years, I realized I had spent more energy protecting my pride than repairing my family. The train announcement echoed through the carriage. My stop is next. The stranger stood, picked up his worn leather bag, and adjusted his coat. I quickly stood too. Please. You still haven't told me who you are. He smiled warmly. I'm someone who was shown kindness when I needed it most. Before stepping toward the exit, he handed me a folded envelope. When you reach home, he said, open it. Then he disappeared onto the rainy platform. I rushed to the window, but within seconds he had vanished into the crowd. It was as if he had never been there. The rest of the journey passed in silence. When I finally reached my apartment, I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a single handwritten note. The secrets that hurt us the most are often the ones we never speak aloud. Share your kindness before your regrets become your memories. There was also enough cash to cover 2 months of rent. No name. No phone number. Nothing else. The next morning, I called my sister. She answered on the second ring. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, she whispered, I've been hoping you'd call. We both cried. Months passed. I found a new job. Life slowly became brighter. But I never forgot the stranger. Whenever I saw someone struggling, I remembered the teenage boy on the train, the little girl with the knitted teddy, and the words that changed my life. I began paying for meals when someone couldn't afford them. I volunteered on weekends. I listened more carefully to lonely people. I discovered that kindness doesn't always require wealth, it only requires a willing heart. Years later, during another train journey, I noticed a young woman sitting alone with tears running down her face. She looked exactly as hopeless as I once had. Without thinking, I walked over and offered her the empty seat beside me. After listening to her story, I quietly paid for her ticket when I learned she had no money left. Before leaving the train, I handed her a small note that read, Your worth is greater than your worst day. Pass this kindness on when you can. As the train pulled away, she smiled through her tears. In that moment, I finally understood. Perhaps the stranger had never intended for me to discover who he was. His greatest secret wasn't how he knew mine. It was that one act of kindness, offered at exactly the right moment, can echo through countless lives, changing people who will never even know each other's names.